A lone cowboy shunned by his town rescues a settler's daughter, and she restores his faith. The town had grown around the river and the open plains, built by men and women who believed hard work and faith could tame any wild place. Wooden houses lined the dirt road, and the sound of hammers and wagon wheels once filled the air with hope. But on the far edge of this town, beyond the last fence and the final lantern, lived a man no one wanted to remember. His name was rarely spoken. When it came out low and uneasy, as if saying it too loudly might invite trouble. To most people, he was simply the lone cowboy. He lived in a small cabin where the grass grew tall and the wind never rested. The roof leaked when the rain came hard, and the door creaked every time he opened it. He had built the place himself years ago, when he still believed he might one day belong somewhere. Now it stood as proof of how far he had been pushed away. Each morning he woke before the sun, not because he had somewhere to go or someone waiting, but because sleep brought memories he no longer wished to see. He would step outside, breathe in the cold air, and saddle his horse in silence. The horse was his only companion, a calm and loyal animal that asked for nothing but care. Together, they rode the open land, checking cattle that no longer belonged to the town, but to him alone. There was a time when things were different. Years earlier, the cowboy had been just another man trying to make a life. He worked long days, helped neighbors when asked, and shared meals at the small tavern on weekends. He wasn't loud or charming, but he was steady. People trusted him with their fences, their horses, even their children for short rides across the fields. Then one bad night changed everything. A fire broke out near the edge of town. It spread fast, driven by wind and fear. In the chaos, someone went missing. By morning, blame had already found a home. Whispers moved quicker than truth, and before anyone stopped to ask questions, the finger pointed toward the cowboy. He tried to speak. He tried to explain where he had been, what he had done, but fear had already closed their ears. From that day on, doors shut when he passed. Conversations ended the moment he stepped near. Mothers pulled their children closer. Men watched him with hands resting near their belts, not in trust but in warning. No proof was ever found. No clear story was ever told. Still, the damage was done. The cowboy left the center of town soon after. He took what little he owned and moved to the land no one wanted. He told himself it was temporary, that time would clear his name. Days turned into months and months into years. The town never came back for him. Now he was a shadow at the edge of their lives. When he rode into town for supplies, it was always quick. He kept his head down, spoke only when needed, and paid in full. The store owner avoided his eyes. The blacksmith finished his work without a word. Children stared, curious and afraid, until their parents pulled them away. Each visit reminded him of what he had lost. At night, he sat alone by a small fire outside his cabin. The sky above him was wide and filled with stars, more than he could ever count. Sometimes he wondered if anyone in town ever looked up and felt the same loneliness he did. The fire crackled, and the wind carried sounds from far away, but never voices meant for him. He had learned not to expect kindness. Still, somewhere deep inside, a quiet part of him refused to die. It was the part that believed people could be better, that one day the truth might matter. He tried to bury it under routine and distance, but it lingered, stubborn and aching. That evening the sky grew heavy with clouds. The air smelled of rain, thick and sharp. He finished his work early, sensing a storm coming. As he rode along the river path, thunder rolled in the distance, low and warning. He considered turning back. Storms were dangerous, especially near the water, but something made him slow his horse instead. Maybe it was habit, or maybe it was that small part of him that still cared about the world beyond his fence. The river was rising fast, swollen from days of unseen rain upstream. The current moved rough and restless. He watched it for a moment, remembering how many times he had crossed it without trouble. Tonight felt different. Then he heard it, a sound carried by the wind, thin but clear enough to stop him cold. A cry, not loud but desperate. He sat still, listening. Thunder answered, but beneath it the sound came again. Fear sharpened his senses. Without thinking about who might blame him or what trouble might follow, he turned his horse toward the sound. As he rode closer, the storm broke open. Rain fell hard, blinding and heavy. The river spilled over its banks, swallowing the path. Through the rain, he saw the shape of a wagon tipped at a dangerous angle, its wheels caught in mud and water. And near it, clinging to the side, was a young woman. She struggled to hold on as the water pulled at her dress and boots. Panic showed in every movement. She was alone. No one else was coming. For a moment, the cowboy hesitated, not from fear of the water, but from the old weight pressing down on him. If something went wrong, if she was harmed, the town would not ask how or why. They would only see him. Then her grip slipped. That moment decided everything. He rode forward without another thought, guiding his horse carefully through the mud and rushing water. The river fought him, but he pressed on, reaching her just as she lost her hold. He grabbed her arm, steady and firm, and pulled her toward him. She cried out, frightened, but he spoke calmly, telling her to trust him, to hold on. His voice was rough from disuse but strong. Together they moved away from the wagon, step by step, until they reached higher ground. When they finally stopped, both soaked and shaking, the rain softened into a steady fall. The woman collapsed onto the ground, breathing hard. The cowboy knelt nearby, making sure she was safe, his own arm aching from the strain. She looked up at him, fear still in her eyes, then confusion. He expected her to pull away. He expected suspicion. Instead, she whispered, "Thank you." The words struck him deeper than the storm ever could. He stood slowly, offering her his coat against the cold. She hesitated, then accepted it. For the first time in years, someone looked at him not as a warning, but as a rescuer. The night closed around them, heavy and uncertain. The town was miles away, unaware of what had just happened. And the cowboy, standing in the rain beside a stranger he had saved, had no idea that this moment would begin to change everything he thought he knew about himself, about others, and about hope. But for now, there was only the storm, the river behind them, and the quiet beginning of something neither of them could yet understand. The rain did not stop after the rescue. It fell through the night, steady and cold, turning the land into thick mud and keeping the sky dark. The cowboy knew the river would only grow more dangerous, and there was no safe way to take the young woman back to town in that weather. Even if the storm cleared, the town itself was a risk he did not want to place on her shoulders while she was weak and shaken. He helped her onto his horse, careful and respectful, then walked beside them as they moved slowly toward his cabin. The path was narrow, and more than once his boots slipped, but he never let go of the reins. The woman clung to the saddle horn, exhausted, trusting him without knowing why. When they reached the cabin, it looked smaller than usual, almost fragile under the heavy clouds. He opened the door and guided her inside. The place was simple: one table, 2 chairs, a narrow bed, and a small stove. Everything was clean but worn, shaped by years of quiet use. He lit a fire quickly, his movements practiced, then stepped back to give her space. She stood near the door for a moment, unsure, still catching her breath. Water dripped from her hair onto the floor. Her hands trembled, partly from the cold, partly from what she had just survived. "You're safe here," he said gently. "The storm should pass by morning." She nodded, though fear still lingered in her eyes. He poured water into a kettle and set it on the stove, then found a dry blanket and handed it to her. Their hands touched briefly, and she flinched out of habit, then relaxed when nothing bad followed. "Thank you," she said again, louder this time. "I didn't think anyone would hear me." "I almost didn't," he replied honestly. She wrapped the blanket around herself and sat on the chair nearest the fire. The warmth slowly returned to her face. After a moment, she spoke again. "My name is Clara," He paused before answering. Names had power and he had learned to keep his clothes. Still, something about her quiet strength made him answer. "I'm Daniel." She looked up at him, surprised, as if she had not expected him to offer that much. "Daniel," she repeated, as if fixing it in her mind. He poured the hot water into a cup and gave it to her. She held it with both hands, breathing in the steam. For a while, neither of them spoke. The sound of rain on the roof filled the space between them. Eventually, Clara broke the silence. "I was bringing supplies from the next settlement. My father sent me ahead. The wheel caught in the mud and the river rose so fast. I thought I was going to be taken with it." Daniel nodded. He knew that river well. "It takes people by surprise." She studied him as if seeing him clearly for the first time. "You were riding alone near the river in a storm." He gave a small shrug. "It's what I do." She did not ask more, but her eyes held questions. As the night went on, the storm slowly weakened. Clara's strength returned little by little, though exhaustion pulled at her. Daniel showed her the bed and insisted she rest. He took a chair near the fire, turning his back to give her privacy. Sleep did not come easily for either of them. Clara woke once from a dream of rushing water, her breath quick and uneven. Daniel noticed and spoke softly, reminding her she was safe. His calm voice grounded her. Soon after, she slept again, deeper this time. Daniel stayed awake until the fire burned low. His thoughts wandered in directions he did not expect. He was used to silence, to solitude. Sharing his space felt strange but not unwelcome. There was no fear in her presence, no judgment, only quiet trust. Morning arrived pale and clean. The rain had stopped, leaving the world washed and new. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Daniel moving carefully around the cabin. She sat up, embarrassed at first, then remembered where she was and why. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she said quickly. "You didn't," he replied. "Storms don't ask permission." She smiled faintly. After breakfast, Daniel walked outside to check the river. It had calmed but was still high. He knew it would be dangerous to cross for another day. When he returned, Clara was standing near the door looking out at the open land. "I've never been this far from town," she said. "It's quiet." "It can be," he answered. "Too quiet, some say." She turned toward him. "I don't mind it." They spent the day waiting. Daniel tended to his chores while Clara rested and helped where she could. She swept the floor, washed dishes, and offered to mend a tear in his shirt when she noticed it. He tried to refuse, but she insisted. Her hands were steady, careful. As hours passed, conversation came easier. She spoke of her family, of her hopes to one day teach children to read, of her love for the land despite its hardships. Daniel listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, it was in short, honest sentences. At one point she asked, "Why do you live so far from town?" The question hung heavy between them. He did not answer right away. Then slowly he said, "The town and I didn't agree anymore." She sensed there was more but did not press. "Sometimes distance is safer," she said simply. Those words stayed with him. By the next morning the river had lowered enough for travel. Daniel prepared to take Clara back. She packed her things, moving slower than before, as if not quite ready to leave. When they reached the edge of town, Clara stopped the horse. "Will you come with me?" she asked. "So they know what you did." Daniel's jaw tightened. "It's better if I don't." She looked disappointed but did not argue. "I won't forget," she said instead. As she rode toward the town, Daniel watched until she disappeared among the buildings. He felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not pain, not hope, but the quiet feeling that something important had begun. He turned his horse and rode back to his cabin, unaware that Clara would not stay silent, and that the rescue he thought would end at the river had only just begun. Clara did not forget. When she returned to her father's home, the town felt smaller than before. The same dirt roads, the same faces, the same careful distance people kept from one another. Yet everything looked different to her now, as if she had stepped into a place that no longer fully fit her heart. Her father was waiting at the door when she arrived. His relief showed clearly on his face as he hurried toward her, asking questions all at once. She told him about the storm, the river, and how close she had come to losing everything. Then she spoke of Daniel. Her father listened in silence. When she finished, he let out a long breath. "You were lucky," he said, "very lucky." "I was saved," Clara corrected gently. Word traveled quickly, even when she did not speak loudly. By the next day, neighbors stopped by, asking about the storm and the overturned wagon. Each time, Clara told the same story, calm and clear. A lone cowboy near the river, a steady hand, a quiet voice that did not panic, a man who stayed when anyone else might have turned away. Some people frowned. Some shook their heads. A few looked uncomfortable. "Are you sure it was him?" someone asked. "The one who lives outside town?" "Yes," Clara answered every time. "I am sure." While the town talked, Daniel returned to his routine. He woke early, worked the land, cared for his horse, and kept to himself. Yet something had changed. The cabin felt less empty than before. The silence no longer pressed so hard against him. He caught himself thinking of Clara, her steady gaze, her calm gratitude, the way she listened without suspicion. He told himself it was nothing, a passing moment. Life would return to the way it had always been, but it did not. 2 days after Clara left, Daniel noticed fresh tracks near his fence. Someone had been there recently. He followed the marks to the edge of his land and stopped. A small bundle lay tied neatly to the fence post, bread, dried meat, and a note written in careful letters. It read simply, "Thank you for your kindness." He stood there longer than he meant to, holding the note as if it might disappear. More signs followed. When he rode into town for supplies, the store owner did not turn away this time. The greeting was brief and uncertain, but it was there. At the well, 2 men nodded instead of stepping aside. Daniel noticed these things but did not trust them yet. He had learned how quickly kindness could fade. Clara continued to speak, not with anger but with truth. She told her friends what she had seen. She told her father's friends. She did not argue with those who doubted her. She simply repeated the facts and let them sit. One afternoon she made a decision. She packed a small basket and walked beyond the edge of town, following the path she remembered from the storm. The sky was clear and the land stretched wide and quiet. When she reached Daniel's fence, she paused, unsure if she was welcome. He saw her from a distance and felt his chest tighten. Visitors were rare. He set aside his tools and approached slowly. "You shouldn't be here alone," he said, not unkindly. "I know," she replied, "but I wanted to come." They stood awkwardly for a moment, unsure where to begin. "I brought you something," she said, holding out the basket. "I hope that's all right," he nodded. "You didn't have to. I wanted to." He led her inside the fence, not into the cabin, but toward a shaded spot near the trees. They sat on a fallen log, the land open around them. She told him about her return, about the questions, the looks, the doubts. "Some people still don't believe me," she admitted, "but some do." He listened quietly. "They don't need to," he said. "I didn't save you to change their minds." "I know," she said, "but it matters." She looked at him then, really looked, and saw the weariness he carried. "What happened to you?" she asked softly. He stared out at the open land. For a long time he said nothing. Then slowly he told her. Not every detail, not every wound, but enough. About the fire, the fear. The way blame had settled on him like dust no one bothered to wipe away. "I left because staying hurt more," he finished. Clara did not interrupt. When he finished, she spoke quietly. "That wasn't fair." "No," he agreed. "It was." She stayed longer than he expected. They talked about small things, the weather, the land, the way storms came without warning. Before she left, she said, "You're not invisible, Daniel, even if they act like you are." After that, she came often. Sometimes alone, sometimes with her father. Each visit was simple. A shared meal, a conversation, a quiet moment that asked for nothing. Daniel found himself waiting for those visits. The town noticed. Whispers shifted tone. A few people began to question what they thought they knew. Others resisted, clinging to old stories. But doubt had been planted, and it grew slowly. One day, a fence broke near the edge of town and cattle wandered into the road. Without thinking, Daniel rode out to help. When he returned the animals, the owner hesitated, then thanked him. The words sounded strange but sincere. Daniel nodded and left, his heart beating faster than usual. That evening, Clara visited again. "They're changing," she said. "Some," he replied. "That's how it starts." He watched the sun sink behind the hills, painting the sky with soft color. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a future that was not shaped by exile. Still, fear lingered. Hope was dangerous. He knew how easily it could be taken away. One night, as he sat by the fire, he realized something that surprised him. The town had not restored his faith. Clara had. Through her quiet courage, her steady truth, and her refusal to accept lies, she had given him something he thought he had lost forever. Not trust in people, but belief in the possibility of change. As the stars appeared above him, Daniel felt the weight inside him ease just a little. And though the road ahead was uncertain, he no longer felt completely alone walking it. Change did not arrive all at once. It came slowly, like morning light that first touches the hills before it reaches the valley. Daniel felt it in small moments, moments so quiet they could almost be missed. He noticed it when he rode past the edge of town and no one turned away. He noticed it when a child waved before being pulled back by a parent, then waved again when the parent did not stop them. These were not grand gestures, but they were different from before. Still, Daniel did not trust the shift. He had lived too long on the outside to believe in sudden acceptance. Clara continued to visit, though not as often as before. She had responsibilities at home, and her father needed her help. But whenever she came, she brought more than food or supplies. She brought conversation that felt easy and silence that did not feel heavy. One afternoon, as they sat near the fence watching clouds move across the sky, she said, "Some people want to speak to you." Daniel stiffened. "About what?" "About the past," she replied carefully. "They want to understand." He let out a quiet breath. "Understanding comes late for some." "I know," she said, "but it's coming." That evening, Daniel did not sleep well. Old memories stirred, sharp and restless. He remembered standing in the town square years ago, trying to explain, watching faces harden instead of soften. The thought of facing that again made his chest tighten. The next day, a small group arrived at his land. They stopped at the fence, unsure whether to cross it. Daniel recognized them, men who had once shared meals with him, worked alongside him, then turned away without looking back. He approached slowly, his posture guarded. "We won't stay long," one of them said. His voice carried uncertainty, not authority. We owe you words." Daniel said nothing. The man continued, eyes on the ground. "We were wrong. We let fear decide for us. We didn't listen." Another stepped forward. "You saved Clara, that matters, and maybe we should have seen who you were before now." The silence stretched. Daniel felt many emotions rise at once, anger, sadness, relief, and something close to grief. Not for what was said, but for all the years it had taken. "I didn't ask for your belief," Daniel finally said. "I only wanted peace." The men nodded. "We can't change what we did," one said, "but we can stop doing it." They left soon after, respectful and quiet. Daniel stood alone for a long time after they were gone. The words had not healed everything, but they had opened a door that had been closed for years. Not everyone followed their example. There were still those who watched him closely, who whispered when he passed, who believed that once someone was marked, they stayed marked forever. Daniel accepted that. He did not need everyone. He only needed truth to stand. Clara's presence became more important during this time. She understood the weight of change and the cost of it. One evening, as they walked along the riverbank, Daniel spoke openly. "I'm afraid," he admitted, "not of being alone again, but of hoping." She stopped and faced him. Hope doesn't promise safety, she said gently. It only promises possibility. He nodded, though his eyes stayed on the water. A week later, the town held a gathering. Nothing formal, just a shared meal near the center, meant to bring people together after a hard season. Clara's father approached Daniel that morning. "You should come," he said. "No pressure, just come if you can." Daniel hesitated. "I don't know if I belong there." "You belong where you choose to stand," the man replied. Daniel thought of the cabin, the open land, the years of silence. Then he thought of Clara, of her courage, of the way she spoke truth without anger. Slowly, he agreed. When Daniel rode into town that evening, conversation faltered. People turned to look, unsure what to do. He stopped near the edge, ready to leave if needed. Clara saw him and walked over, smiling. She did not rush, did not pull him forward. She simply stood beside him. That was enough. Someone offered him food. Another nodded in greeting. A few avoided his eyes, but no one asked him to leave. He stayed longer than he thought he would. As the evening wore on, stories were shared, laughter rose, and the air softened. Daniel listened more than he spoke. He did not try to prove anything. He was simply present. Later that night, as he prepared to leave, the same man who had first spoken to him at the fence approached again. "There's talk," the man said carefully, "about making things right, about clearing your name." Daniel's heart tightened. "Truth doesn't need permission," he replied. "But it helps," the man said quietly. Daniel rode home under a sky full of stars. The land felt different beneath him, not changed but acknowledged. When he reached his cabin, he dismounted slowly, letting the moment settle. He sat by the fire and thought of the past, not with bitterness but with clarity. He had survived what many would not. He had kept his heart open when it would have been easier to close it. The next morning, a letter arrived. It was simple and direct. The town council wished to speak with him, to formally address what had happened years ago. Daniel held the letter for a long time before setting it down. He did not know what he would say. He did not know how much peace could truly be restored. But he knew one thing clearly now: he was no longer alone in carrying the truth. Clara visited later that day. He showed her the letter. She smiled softly. "Whatever you decide," she said, "you don't have to face it by yourself." Daniel looked out at the land, then back at her. For the first time in many years, the future did not feel like a closed road. It felt like a path, uneven, uncertain, but open. And as the wind moved gently through the grass, Daniel understood that faith was not restored by forgiveness alone, but by the courage to keep standing, even when the ground beneath you once fell away. The letter stayed on Daniel's table for 2 days before he touched it again. Each time he passed it, he felt the weight of years pressing against his chest. It was strange how a single piece of paper could hold so much history, pain, silence, and the chance of release. On the third morning, he folded it carefully and placed it in his jacket. The decision came quietly, without drama. He would go, not because the town asked, and not because they owed him anything, but because he owed himself the chance to finish what had been left open for too long. Clara walked with him to the edge of his land. The sky was clear, the air calm, as if the world itself was holding its breath. "You don't have to speak much," she said. "Just speak true." Daniel nodded. "That's all I know how to do." When he reached the town hall, people were already there. Some faces were familiar, others newer. Conversation slowed as he entered, then stopped altogether. He felt every eye on him, but he stood straight, grounding himself in the moment. The meeting was simple. No raised voices, no anger. Just questions, facts, and the truth finally spoken aloud without fear. The fire years ago had started from faulty equipment, not human hands. The missing man had left town that same night, something known by a few but ignored by many. Fear had filled the gaps where honesty should have lived. When it was over, the room felt lighter. A statement was read aloud. Daniel's name was cleared, not with applause but with quiet acknowledgement, the kind that mattered more. As he left, a woman approached him. "I should have spoken sooner," she said. "I'm sorry." Daniel met her eyes. "I know," he replied. Outside, Clara waited. She did not ask what was said. She did not need to. She saw it in his shoulders, no longer bent under the old weight. The days that followed were not perfect, but they were different. Daniel began riding into town without feeling watched. He helped mend fences. He shared meals. He laughed once, surprised by the sound of it. Still, he returned each evening to his cabin. The land beyond town was still his refuge. He had learned that belonging did not mean giving up solitude. It meant choosing when to share it. One evening, Clara came with news. "My father's land needs help," she said. "He asked if you'd consider working with us." Daniel thought about it, about mornings filled with purpose, evenings filled with conversation, about a life not divided by distance anymore. "I'll help," he said, "but I'll keep my home," she smiled. "I wouldn't expect anything else." Seasons changed. Grass grew tall, then dry. The river calmed and rushed again. Through it all, Daniel remained steady. The town did not become perfect, but it became honest. One afternoon, as the sun lowered, Daniel and Clara stood near the river where they had first met. The water moved gently now, reflecting the sky. "You saved me," she said quietly. He shook his head. "You saved me too." She did not argue. As the light faded, Daniel felt something settle deep inside him, not joy, not relief, but peace. The kind that comes when a long road finally reaches its end. He had been shunned, forgotten, and judged, but he had also been seen, trusted, and believed. His faith was not restored by a town's apology, but by one person's courage to speak the truth. And that, he knew, was enough.